Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast formerly known as Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr, and welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. And Tom, I had people asking me, and I'm sure you did too, you go to the grocery store, people are asking, why are you changing the name? Why have you changed the name? And it's pretty simple. It's easier to find when you're doing a Buckeye-related podcast and the word Buckeye is in the title. So it's a Google thing, it's an SEO thing, it's an iTunes thing. And that's basically, we've been talking about this for a while. It was overdue. I'll always appreciate the original title given to me from former Buckeye walk-on Jordan Howisher, and so I appreciate that. We'll thank him for that. But Tom, it was time to go to a title that is, I guess, easier for people to find who would be looking for a Buckeye podcast.
Audience made up of Buckeye fans, as opposed to the last couple of years when it's been mostly criminals looking to accost people.
Right.
Which, I mean, we love that portion of our audience, mm-hmm. and we will always cherish them, and we will continue to answer your questions about accosting people. But I think this may reflect better what we're doing, but also this is I don't know if this will hold us to doing a weekly podcast. If we do two, since we're doing two podcasts in a week, do we immediately have a podcast name that is incorrect?
It would not be the first time, but I mean, as long as the podcast happens each week, then I don't think it matters how many in a week.
Yeah, we're delivering more than we were promising, so I guess that's good.
That's every episode.
One thing that would be tremendously helpful with a name that is something that people will be searching, what would help us tremendously to make it pop up earlier in the list for people who are searching for Buckeye podcasts would be to rate and review us. We ask you to do that all the time, but we're asking you especially hard right now. And I have heard there's a rumor that if we get 100 5-star reviews before the Michigan game, that Michigan will forfeit and Ohio State will win the game this year. So, I mean, I would certainly hope that our listeners would not want to, look back after that game and think, could I have done more? Could I have left more 5-star reviews on the Buckeye Weekly podcast?
Right. What have you done today to defeat Michigan? And if your answer is, well, I didn't rate the podcast, then you have not done enough. And you should look at yourself in the mirror. You should tell your family that you have failed them, and they'll know what it's about. Trust me, they'll know. And if you don't want that pain, then just rate, review us, and be a part of this whole thing, Tom.
Trust is an important part of every relationship. So you should know the passcode to your spouse's phone. So once you've done it on your phone, grab their phone, rate and review on their phone. Undoubtedly, you have an older relative who may need help at some point with technology, as older relatives tend to. When you're helping them figure out on their jitterbug where the call button is, rate and review on the jitterbug as well. I'm sure we're available on Jitterbug right now, right?
I don't know what that is. Is that an old folks dating site?
It is. Oh man, that is a weird name for an old folks dating site. No, the Jitterbug is the phone that they advertise on.
Yes.
It's basically an old person phone with huge buttons and basically engineered for 85-year-olds who can't use any other technology to have two buttons on the phone, and one of them calls your kids and the other one calls the pharmacy or something. So yes, that's a Jitterbug. So now that we've completely derailed the podcast, we maybe deserve 6 stars.
But and if you would please rate, review us, screenshot your review and your rating. You can DM me, you can email me at tonygerdeman@gmail.com. And after I get, a handful of these, I don't know, 10 or 15, I'll pick, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 random and send those people. I'll get in touch with those people and send them a copy of the Thrilogy, the story of the 2015 postseason for the Buckeyes, 2014 season, postseason. And, and I know I still owe somebody else out there, and I'll get that one out as well. Now, I will tell you the book rate is like, it's like $3.45. So probably going to have to wait until the 15th of the month but I can get 4 or 5 out, after the 15th. So if you guys would do that, let us know. Send it to Tom. Send it to me. We would appreciate it. It helps us, and frankly, it helps you. And really, it's okay to be selfish in this situation. So be selfish, help yourself, and rate the show, review it, and you may even get a free book out of it.
And the more listeners we have, the more questions we have, which means the longer these podcasts go, which means you get more Buckeye content. So really, everyone wins, except for me when I have to edit them.
Yeah, so this is going to be like a 3-hour and 45-minute show because there's basketball time, there's football recruiting, there is just a quick look back at the Nebraska game. We don't have to spend too much time on that. There is, what's going on this week. Tuesday night, we talked to Alex Grinch, Tony Alford, Dwayne Haskins, Brendon White, KJ Hill, maybe somebody else. And, there's a whole Michigan State game coming up this weekend. So there is a lot. Firstly, let's start with the basketball. The Micah Potter transfer was announced pretty much out of the blue on Monday. Micah Potter, the, backup to Caleb Wesson, the center for the Buckeyes. And this was a situation where I don't know what he expected. I assume he expected more playing time. He got 10 minutes in the game against UNC Pembroke, playing behind Wesson and even maybe a minute or two alongside him. But after the game, Chris Holtmann said that that's not really a viable plan in college basketball to have two bigs. And I think maybe that was something that Thad Matta had convinced Micah Potter he could do. And it's not going to happen. And it was never going to happen with Holtmann. And so, Micah Potter decided one day or 2 days before the Buckeyes tip off for the season, they play Cincinnati Wednesday, that, he didn't want to be a Buckeye, or he didn't want to be a Buckeye on this team, and he'll transfer. And Tom, you were there with Holtmann on Tuesday. What did he have to say about the transfer?
We got to talk to Kyle Young and Keyshawn Woods, who are obviously players, and then Chris Holtmann as well. Holtmann said basically he didn't come out and say exactly what the issue was. He didn't want to go into too much detail about it, but it sounded like this was not something that had been in the works for a long time. It sounded like it kind of came up kind of, I don't know if it's out of nowhere, but not a whole lot of discussion before it actually happened. And he didn't come right out and say he was mad about playing time, but he said, sometimes it's hard to find a rotation that keeps everyone happy. So you didn't have to read real hard between the lines to figure out that, yep, it was a playing time thing, which, of course, that I don't know what else would cause him to transfer in, at the timing that he had. But it really did come out of nowhere because I think it was Kyle Young or Keyshawn Woods or maybe both of them said they had not heard anything about this until Chris Holtmann got the team together and said, yeah, Mike is transferring. Like, there was no advance notice. There was no discussion about it. It was just, he's gone. Already gone, past tense. So, and neither of them had talked to him. I don't know whether anyone else on the team had talked to him, but neither of them had talked to him since he left. So, I don't know how much, how long this had been brewing, but for those three guys at least, it did not sound like this had been something that had been talked about a whole lot at all before it happened.
And in that UNC Pembroke game, freshman Jaden Ledee received quite a few minutes, and it would seem like he's going to get those minutes now. Kyle Young will get the minutes at the 4, and really Caleb Wesson said he's planning on playing 30 minutes a game, 30 minutes a night. I don't know if that's possible. That's going to depend on his conditioning and his foul trouble. But if that's where he wants to be, then you get, 10, 15 minutes a night from Ledee, which is that's going to be asking a lot for a guy who's not been a post player for much of his basketball career. He's a guy, he was more of a perimeter guy who grew into becoming a post player. So there's going to be a lot required and asked of him this season. And so losing Micah Potter, it's pretty significant because you're asking for a freshman to step up. I don't think it really impacts the Buckeyes starting wise, but you lose your number 2 big man, and that's that's going to be significant anywhere. So I think that's what they'll do now. Just turn to Ledee, turn to make sure Caleb Wesson stays on the court as much as possible, and how much they play Kyle Young at 5, we'll see. Andre Wesson played some 5 against Purdue last year defensively against one of their 16, 7-foot guys. So it's not ideal, but there's not going to be much time about this season that is ideal for the Buckeyes. But there's still going to be there's going to be some things worth watching, and it's a team that you would hope would get better as the season goes on and builds into what they ultimately become next year and the year after.
Yeah, I think that this is a team that is maybe going to follow at least the trajectory, if not maybe the end result of last year, at least the trajectory of last year, where it may start off a little rocky, and you just are going to have to hang in there for a little while as they go through maybe the Syracuse game. I mean, they've got Creighton coming up. Creighton's not fantastic, but they're kind of picked to finish middle of the Big East, so that's a team they could lose to. You've got UCLA coming up in December. It may take a little while for this team to gel, but there are some pieces there that are kind of intriguing, and you saw last year that it looked terrible in November. I mean, they just got absolutely destroyed by Butler, and they lost a couple games in November that were like, how did you lose that game? And then all of a sudden, everything just sort of clicked, and they just destroyed Wisconsin. They beat Michigan in early December, and ended up finishing 15-3 in the Big Ten. That's probably not where they're going to end up this year, but if it starts out looking a little rough at the beginning, you're just going to have to be a little bit patient, because the team in March is not going to be probably anything close to the team in November. Jaden Ledee, you mentioned, he is someone that Chris Holtmann mentioned as someone who was going to have to kind of step up and fill that role for Micah Potter, but it was not very long ago that Chris Holtmann was saying, he's young, he's going to have quite a learning curve. There's a learning curve for big guys. It's not a place where you're going to see an immediate impact necessarily. So it could look real rough there for Jaden Ledee, because he's getting kind of thrust into the spotlight maybe before, potentially before he's really ready to. So if he has some rough early games, don't completely write him off as a lost cause, because he's probably going to be forced to play before he's truly ready to play. And he is like the team on the whole. What you see out of him in March is not necessarily going to be what you see out of him in November or December. So hang in there, be patient, and I think this is going to be, if not, this is not a Final Four team this year, but I think this is going to be an interesting team to watch this year.
One of those teams that can get a signature win that people remember, and that builds on the team as a whole. But Ledee, just watching him against UNC Pembroke, early on he did not look like a confident basketball player, and you could tell when you're watching these guys whether they feel confident in what they're doing and they know what they're doing. He just seemed like a guy that wasn't really sure and wasn't sure how he was going to perform, but he got better. He got more confident, ended up scoring 9 points, grabbing 7 rebounds, did most of his damage at the free throw line. And that's another thing about him. He's got a good stroke. I think for him, it's going to be a matter of confidence. And, right away to open the season, Wednesday night, 6 p.m. at Cincinnati, breaking in their new renovated gym. That's going to be a tall order for not just him, but every single Buckeye. And it's not something that Chris Holtmann wants a more difficult schedule. Didn't necessarily, I remember at Basketball Media Day a few weeks back saying he didn't realize that they'd be opening up, the renovated gym this week or for this game. So that's going to be a tough situation for the team. But, I mean, right away you'll know where you stand. And Cincinnati, I think they're among the others receiving votes in the polls. So that, they're 25, 35 in there. Buckeyes go in there if they can come out, pull out a win, or just this will be an opportunity for you guys to see how much. First of all, Caleb Wesson looks pretty different than what he did last year. He's slimmed down. You'll see Luther Muhammad, the freshman guard. He'll likely start at shooting guard. He's a confident player. He can get into the lane. He's a guy that just understands the game, looks like he knows what he's doing. And for me, though, like so much of this season is just going to come down to whether C.J. Jackson and Andre Weston are hitting their threes. And if they are, then you could add 3 or 4 or 5 more wins onto the win total. If they aren't, then 16, 17 wins, something like that. But Chris Holtmann is confident that both of those guys will hit their shots. They need to, and they're going to get plenty of opportunities to. But Tom, right now, yes or no, is this a tournament team?
They will make one of the postseason tournaments, so yes.
Good answer.
I don't know if they will. I don't know if they will make the NCAA. They are probably a team that I think you're going to know by the end of December if they're a tournament team. Because if they can steal one of these, if they can beat Syracuse or they can beat UCLA and get kind of a quality win out of conference, that's the kind of thing that can kind of push you off the bubble and into the tournament. Because I think that by the end of the season, they will be a tournament quality team. But I don't know if they will necessarily, if they can get it together fast enough to have a tournament quality resume. That's kind of more of the question for me. Chris Holtmann talked about that non-conference schedule because there were a number of people who were all asking very nicely, trying very nicely to not ask the question in this way. So you're probably going to get murdered a couple times early in the season. Are you cool with that? People were kind of tap dancing around like, so you guys probably aren't going to be real good to start with, and you're playing some tough teams. How's that going to work out for you? And Holtmann said basically, this is the non-conference schedule he wants. He wants to play challenging teams because of the way the committee views quality wins. If you can get a quality win or two out of conference, then having a loss to a top-level team doesn't really hurt you. So you're better off trying to beat a Syracuse, which is at least a Sweet 16 probably caliber team, if not better this year. So if you can beat a Syracuse, or you can beat a UCLA, or even a Creighton, who could be kind of a bubble team, you get a couple of those wins. That helps you. I mean, you don't want to just play the 200 RPI kind of teams. That doesn't do you anything. That doesn't tell you anything about yourself. That doesn't help your tournament resume. He wants to play these tough non-conference games. So if they can find a way to win one or two of those, then they probably are a tournament team, because that gets your resume built a little faster. And if they get to that point, then they could be a tournament team at the end of the year. If they can win one or two of those non-conference games, you can potentially get yourself in.
I do expect them to be better than people expect. That's my view of Chris Holtmann as a whole. Very much like Thad Matta in the early days, or even after that, where he would get the most out of his guys in the first 2 years, and I think we'll see that with Holtmann's team as well. There are some decent pieces, but I just think he puts them together in better ways and makes them better than the individual parts. And the season starts Wednesday night. I'll be interested to see how it goes. And Tom, there's nothing better than football season and basketball season going together like peanut butter and jelly all the time, and not enough time for either one. But here they are together, and it's just beautiful.
We're going to have our cars parked over in that lot, like between the Schottenstein Center and the Woody Hayes, so much this fall. They'll be parked there long enough to get detailed. We should just have people come out and detail our cars for us, since we're going to just be there so many afternoons for basketball interviews and then football interviews. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I can't wait. Well, it's already here. Before we go to football, let's talk a little bit football recruiting. Buckeyes got a couple of commits this week. The 2019 running back Marcus Crowley, they flipped from the Miami Hurricanes. He attends the Trinity Christian Academy, which is where Sean Wade is from, which is where Tyreek Johnson, freshman cornerback, is from. So this is a guy that once it was determined that Samson James, their running back commit from Indiana, was not going to be a Buckeye, and whether that was his decision or OSU's decision, once it was determined that he was on his way out, then they set their sights on Marcus Crowley. He was their number one guy, and that they put everybody on him and set everybody forth to go get him. and it took about, I don't know, 4 weeks, 3.5, 4 weeks to get it done. And this is a guy who had been committed to Miami for almost a year, December of 2017. So they went out, and he was at the game. He was at the Nebraska game, Tom. He was in our way. They were doing a photo shoot. We were trying to walk back after the game, and security would not let us onto the field for our normal, shortcut to the press box. So very annoying. This guy has already gotten off on a bad foot, and I don't know that he's going to make it.
I can't wait for the signing day press conference when they bring him out, whenever he enrolls, and we get to talk to him for the first time. And your first question to him is, where do you get off, mister? Do you know who I am? Do you know I had to walk underneath the South Stands? What is wrong with you? Come on. We talked about him. I think we've talked about him on the podcast, but I know we've talked about him off air. As soon as that Samson James decommit came, it was very apparent that he was like their number one target there. He's a 3-star recruit, and he plays at a pretty big program, so you'd think, okay, is he not really that good? Like, because he's not, this is not someone who's from the middle of nowhere in South Dakota, so it's not like an overlooked kind of guy. But then you watch his highlights, and it's like that is not a 3-star highlight reel. He is an impressive back, and he's got some pretty good size. He looks like a Big Ten running back when I look at him, right? I mean, he's got that kind of, I don't know, I haven't looked at his measurements compared to like a Beanie Wells or an Antonio Pittman, but he is kind of a little bit of a bigger back, but he's got pretty good speed. He's got pretty good moves. He's someone who I think could be a pretty good player for them in a year or two, because you lose Weber this year. You've got one more year with J.K. Dobbins, and you've got Brian Snead and Master Teague ahead of him. But he's someone who you give him a year or two, he could be a name that's a household name in a couple of years.
Yeah, he's a big play guy, averaging over 10 yards a carry. He doesn't play in blowouts, and on a very good team, I've been told he's the best player. And this is a guy who has teammates who are 2020 cornerback prospects. That there's 2 of them. Both are looking at Ohio State: Fred Davis and Miles Brooks. So there's plenty of talent there, and so Crowley will be one to watch. The Buckeyes also got a commit from a 2020 Texas wide receiver.
He's going to be a household name, but nobody's going to know how to say it.
Jackson Smith. We got that part. Jackson Smith. Njigba?
Jackson Smith hyphen, and then Gerd trails off. Yes. The last name is spelled Smith hyphen Njigba. So I'm going with Njigba.
And he's rated the 59th receiver in the 2020 class, number 288 overall. When I was watching him, I saw KJ Hill, basically. A guy who can play inside out. Doesn't look like he's the fastest guy, but he makes catches, gets open. And I just see him working, very much like a KJ Hill, catching stuff. And, he may not take the 10-yard catch 80 yards, but he picks up the first down. And everybody needs one of those guys. And you look at KJ Hill, he might not have all the measurables. And you just look at the measurables and you're like, well, I don't want him. But then you look at what KJ Hill has done this year for the Buckeyes, and, what would they do without him? So that's who I see when I see Jackson Smith hyphen in Njigba. I don't know. What'd you think?
That's a pretty good comp. He's 6'1", and he's still got another year and a half before he'd be enrolling in college. So you don't know exactly how big he is. He may grow out of that H position, but if he does play H, he is closest in skill set to KJ Hill of all the current Buckeye H's, I think. You could see him move outside because he does play.
Definitely.
I mean, just in the highlight reel, which is obviously a very limited number of plays, you see him playing slot, you see him playing outside, you see him running deep routes, you see him running jet sweeps, he kind of does a little bit of everything for that team. And there's the standard high school highlight reel where he just runs a 9 route and just zips right past a completely overmatched corner and scores a touchdown. But he has some plays on there where he's catching a little hitch and puts a little shake on and then zips past everyone, and he's running jet sweeps, and he's inside and he's outside. So I think they may wait until he gets on campus and see how big he is in a year and a half before they really decide where to play him. But yeah, right now KJ Hill's a pretty good comp, I think.
Tom, I just saw on TV that Dick Vitale has a new book out. It's called Dick Vitale's Mount Rushmore of College Basketball. And I don't know that, I mean, how do you write a book about like just 4 names? And I don't expect Dick Vitale to be doing a lot of writing. It just maybe something more than just like the Mount Rushmore of it. Good idea, I guess, for us to do something like that. Mount Rushmore of everything.
How many times is Coach K on there, baby? His Mount Rushmore is 3 Coach Ks and 1 Dean Smith, or Roy Williams. Maybe 3 Coach Ks and 1 Roy Williams, I'm going to say.
No, I think you would throw Rick Pitino in there because he's totally innocent.
That chapter will only last 15 seconds, so then you got to fill the rest of the book.
And let's start again. No, we've talked about the Nebraska game, and we're like a half hour into it now. We're just finally getting to football. So if you want to hear all of our awesome takes and our sound opinions from the Nebraska game, you can go check them out at theozone.net, or just if you've downloaded the show, listen to it there. The best thing and the worst thing we saw, we do this every week, so now I feel like we have to continue to do that. The best thing for me, Tom, it was just seeing the running backs run again and see them in open fields. And even when those open fields were only 12 or 16 yards, it's still significant to see them get into the second level. And I wouldn't say it gave me hope, but it confirmed that this was still possible. Now that it's a completely different animal once they get into East Lansing this weekend, but we at least saw that it could be done, because there were concerns and questions like, can it be done? And they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is possible to run the ball on the Nebraska Cornhusker defense. And that's the best thing that I saw. It doesn't mean much moving forward, but at least it didn't close the door completely on Ohio State's season. What about you?
Yeah, I had rushing attack, which is probably a little bit running backs like you talked about, and probably a decent amount of offensive line. I mean, the offensive linemen, the 4 previous weeks, 5 out of 20 possible guys had graded out as champions. This week, all 5 guys graded out as champions, which, running the ball against Nebraska doesn't really prove anything, but not being able to run the ball against Nebraska would prove a whole lot of bad stuff. So at least you didn't prove a whole lot of bad stuff. The other thing that I would mention is Brendon White, and I know we're going to get into him more a little bit later, but he was, I don't know if a revelation is too strong, but it was probably the first time that you felt like you could have some pretty solid confidence in that safety position, which you would not have expected that with how the season has gone. And then for that to happen after Jordan Fuller left the game, that was extremely unexpected, and I think had to be a pretty pleasant surprise for this coaching staff.
Yeah, I had a good worst thing, but I've forgotten it, so I guess it couldn't have been that bad. But I also, fumbling the ball 6 times is very, very bad. I don't know when the last time they did that was, maybe the Snow Bowl, but they were fortunate to only lose 2, and that's anytime you fumble the ball 6 times. Tony Alford talked Tuesday night that they didn't really talk to Mike Weber about the fumbles because you don't have to. He knows what he did wrong. But then Alford also said, that's also on me because that's my player doing this. So I must not be focusing enough on it. So there'll be renewed focus there. And it took away from a pretty outstanding game that Mike Weber was having. And it also kept him off the field at the end because they didn't want him to fumble for a 3rd time. So for me, yeah, those fumbles, they were fortunate to get away with it in a 5-point game, to have 4 balls on the ground that you were able to recover, when any one of those really could have been the difference in this game. And Scott Frost talked on Tuesday's Big Ten teleconference that, not that they had the game in their hands, but there were opportunities even in the second half to go up 2 scores, and they didn't make plays that were available to them. and the fact that the Buckeyes are still allowing plays to be available to the opponent to against lesser opponents that were, in theory, that's still not great. What about you?
I'm not sure whether this counts as the best thing or the worst thing, but that Nebraska kickoff attempt was definitely one of those things. That was maybe my favorite highlight of this year so far. I've never seen a kickoff attempt be a lateral before, so that I think has to be the answer, because the turnovers is the actual answer here, but you've covered that pretty well, so I'll go with that, and just that whole you put the Benny Hill music behind that, and it is worth a watch.
It almost went backwards.
I think it did, didn't it? I think it was well, it certainly was behind the kicker. Like the kicker, I don't know. I think did he fall down? He might have fallen down.
Somebody was offside, got flagged for being offsides on that one too. It wasn't the kicker, was it?
I think it might have been the kicker. That is achievement unlocked right there. If the kicker is offsides on a kickoff attempt.
Another disappointing thing for me was, DeMario McCall. He shows up, he gets a catch, and it was hard to see the numbers from up top, but when he made a move, you're like, was that DeMario? And then it was, and you're like, wow. And he should play more. And then, like, the next time the ball gets thrown to him, he's not even looking for it, and you're like, oh, that's why he only plays. He never plays basically. So it was good to see him out there at least, and maybe we'll see him out there against Maryland. I don't foresee him out there this week, but we've been wrong before. Maybe
well,
I'm just trying to, I'm being general, right?
Just trying to be humble. Yeah.
A guy who we will see will be Brendon White, who came off the bench and was going to play this week anyways, or last week anyways, because of the injuries. Plus, he had a good week of practice, good couple of weeks of practice. So he was going to come in on nickel downs. And so when Jordan Fuller got ejected, he got called into action, and in about 3/4 of play, led the team with 13 tackles and had 2 tackles for loss, which is kind of a rarity for the Buckeye safeties nowadays. And it was he ended up being the player of the game defensively. And it was the very performance that they have been looking for out of another safety next to Jordan Fuller all season long. And they haven't gotten it out of Isaiah Pryor, didn't get it out of Jocelyn Wint, didn't get it out of Sean Wade. And in 3/4 of action, this guy looked like Jordan Fuller did last year playing that same position, which means, Tom, that he's not a definite starter, and he's going to have to win the job in practice this week, because apparently he didn't do enough on Saturday.
It at least means there's some good options there, because they've had options there this year, but this might be the first time they've had good options there. attractive options there that are like, oh, these two things are both not bad. That's different. There's been a lot of discussion about, okay, why did it take this long for him to get on the field? Because it seemed very early, pretty obvious that he was playing that position very well. Like looked good there. Looked like he knew what he was doing. Was a good tackler. All of the things that you had not seen out of the safety spot this year, he was doing all of it. So I think that the immediate natural reaction from everyone was, why on earth did it take 9 games to get him on the field? And Urban kind of hinted at this, and then Alex Grinch talked a little bit more about it, but it basically came down to practice, and he wasn't doing the things he needed to do in practice. And both Urban and Alex Grinch kind of like hinted around it and didn't really give specifics. So Tuesday night, when we got a chance to talk to Brendon White, I just flat out asked him, what were you not doing that you now are doing that you have earned the right to be on the field? And he said it was a lot of knowing the calls, because as a safety, you're kind of in charge of knowing, getting guys lined up, getting the calls into the other defensive backs, making sure everyone's in the right spot. And he was not doing some of that stuff earlier in the year, and he's kind of gotten that stuff figured out. Of all the explanations, that's probably the best one, because physically, he knows what he's doing. He looks like he knows where he's supposed to be on every play, which is not something you've necessarily been able to say about everyone who they've rolled out there this year. So if it was something like that, that at least makes more sense than the idea that he was being punished for not practicing well on special teams, which is kind of what Urban Meyer said or implied or suggested earlier in the week. That seemed very strange to me, which I know that's something that they value, and you have to play well on special teams or practice well on special teams, but it seems a little bit cutting off your nose to spite your face that, if it's really he missed a block on punt coverage during practice, well, we're gonna make our point and not let him play on defense, and that point is we're gonna give up 49 points to Purdue. So I like that. The explanation that Brendon White offered tonight made a lot more sense than what had sort of been hinted around and discussed earlier in the week, I think.
I think Alex Grinch said the same thing Tuesday night that Urban Meyer said. It was, he was asked why wasn't he playing before, and he said practice and, special teams. Maybe he didn't block long enough on this special team or on this special unit, and, he finally started doing that. And now there's like this disconnect. Does Brendon White not know why he was playing, why he wasn't playing? And if he thinks that it's just because he knows the calls now and he still goes out and, doesn't go full bore on the special teams this week, do they now hold him back and let Shaun Wade go out there instead? Or do they realize like, well, okay, he's a gamer and, I guess we'll forgive him for this special unit. We'll see. I don't know that they don't seem like the forgiving bunch unless you're in the starting lineup from the get-go, I guess. The thing that I really liked about Brendon White is he was never out of control. And how many times this season have we seen Isaiah Pryor and Jocelyn Wint out of control? Tell me how many?
47.
Exactly. 47 times out of control. Brendon White not once out of control. So I think that's over 40 times fewer of being not out of control. So I think that's a good sign there. The interesting aspect of this whole Brendon White, Shaun Wade, and I also thought it was interesting Tuesday on the teleconference, or maybe Monday, Urban Meyer said that right now the competition at safety opposite Jordan Fuller is Shaun Wade, and it's Brendon White. And Isaiah Pryor, if he has a great week, that's fine. He can maybe get back into that mix. But right now it's between White and Wade. However, they're basically competing for different safety spots. They're competing for the two safety spots that they were playing in the second half last week. So if Shaun Wade has the better week, then he would be the field safety and Jordan Fuller would be the boundary safety. If Brendon White has the better week, then he will be the boundary safety. Jordan Fuller will be the field safety. And Fuller is good enough that he can go back and forth. It's just interesting that you've got these two different guys competing for one spot that is not actually the same spot. And you're asking Jordan Fuller to move around and deal with this. And you're asking for Shaun Wade to be able to play safety, be able to play nickel, and also be a cornerback. And that's asking an awful lot of him. And all they're asking of Brendon White is, block better on special teams, and then you can play on defense. And, that doesn't seem like too much to ask. But I really think, like, sometimes it just, you get that opportunity and you seize it, and then everything starts falling, perfectly for you, and you understand what you should be doing in practice, and you start taking ownership of this and taking ownership of that, and you just get this boost from being a productive, like, leader of the defense or the offense. And if Brendon White is not there this week, I will be pretty, I don't want to say shocked, because right now nothing should shock us, Tom, with this defense, but I would be surprised. And if there are any issues in the secondary, you're going to have some, say Shaun Wade loses somebody and gives up a 93-yard touchdown. You're going to have some Buckeye fans who are like, what the hell,
What the hell, That is exactly what your people are going to be saying.
It will trend on Twitter.
It will. I do wonder if Brendon White might be a better fit this week for a team that is probably a little more run heavy.
I agree.
Traditionally, I mean that he may be a better fit against that type of offense, especially with the weather as it's supposed to be. I have not seen an updated forecast, but I think the high in East Lansing was something like 36 the last time I looked for Saturday. And with it being a noon game, it's not going to be 36 at the beginning of the game. It's going to be colder than that. So I would assume you're going to have probably a little bit more of a traditional Big Ten slugfest kind of game this weekend. And in that kind of game, give me a little bit bigger safety who's shown that he's a sure tackler and is potentially maybe more of a run support kind of guy, and not because Shaun Wade, I think, is probably better in the passing game and just in coverage. Like, you trust Shaun Wade on a receiver or covering a slot more than Brendon White. But against a run team, I think I'd think that Brendon White probably gives him a better look out there.
I mean, he looked like the best tackler on the field last Saturday, so you're going to need more of that. And, Shaun Wade's going to play plenty. There's going to be nickel instances as well. I would just, at this point, you finally got the performance that you have been looking for, so why not accept it? Take it into your heart and accept it, that this performance is what you've been looking for. And don't go on to all those other safety dating sites. You've got somebody right under your nose that is perfect for you. And, just let it be. Go out to dinner, maybe have some nice music and just talk. Get to know each other and just realize that Brendon White is the safety for you. Shaun Wade has a role on this defense, and nickel right now, he can play safety. He'll be a corner again if they need him to, and he'll be fine. But right now, Brendon White showed you what he can do, so let him do it again. And if he doesn't, then, go back to the drawing board. And, this has to be the world's largest drawing board. Alex Grinch said he's pretty frustrated by all of it, basically, the search for this one safety. So if there's a possibility that you found him, then I think I wrote somewhere, mine him, get as much out of him as you can right now. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least you gave him the opportunity to put two good games together and see how that goes.
When your previous streak of good safety play is 0 games, then a 1-game streak is pretty significant. So it's probably worth exploring that for a second week.
Yeah, like the whole, days since injury, like days since safety missed tackle. Now it's like at, I don't know, 10 or something. So that's good. You don't want to go back down to 0, ride this wave.
This wave of 1-game excellence.
Exactly.
Nothing can stop them now.
Right. I mean, yeah, exactly. This train is moving, and you best get out the way because, what comes after 1? 2. And once you get 2 good games going, now we're talking. And then you get to the 3, and nothing can stop you after 3 good games. And just imagining 3 good games from an Ohio State safety that isn't Jordan Fuller. Now we're going back to like 2016 Malik Hooker, Damon Webb type stuff where, 3 games in a row, forget about it. That's elite level. And maybe they can get 2 this week.
After 2 games, baby, you got a stew going.
Exactly. You gotta let that soak, and the next day, and after it's been in the fridge, you throw that sucker in the microwave, and you got yourself a safety. But how many more Brendon Whites are there on this team? Guys who, for one reason or another, they're not playing, but if they had an opportunity to play, they could do this. And you look at areas of, I would say, like questionable performance, or where areas where things are lacking. And I know we always point at the linebackers, but I will say, Tough Borland graded out a champion, 8 tackles, and we'll hold off while you finish scoffing and coughing and chortling and cussing. But he did grade out a champion. The interesting thing for me was Malik Harrison also had 13 tackles, did not grade out a champion. Urban Meyer talked this week about the number of missed tackles by the linebackers in the backfield. Like, I think he said like 6 or 7 missed tackles for loss, and those are killers because you get one of those tackles for loss, and now you're looking at like a 2nd and 15 or a 3rd and 13 where it sets the timing back. It gets the offense off schedule. And if you miss those, that also means you've got a linebacker out of position, and now there's a lane to run. And Malik Harrison has missed quite a few tackles this year, and I'm going to assume that is the main reason why he didn't get out a champion and coverages in there and run fits and all of that. But Pete Werner, it's not his fault that last touchdown he gave up. Not only are they asking him to cover J.D. Spielman, they also picked him. All right? Nebraska threw a pick at him, and that's just dirty. Not only are you like asking him to defend a slot receiver, then you're offensively pass interfering with him, and people want to give him grief for that. But, you look at the linebackers, Wyatt Davis got to play on the offensive line. He looked pretty good doing that. Tom, there are other Brendon Whites out there on this team, but I don't know that we're going to see them.
Yeah, and I think that we are almost certainly not going to see them because Urban Meyer talked on Monday that you can't keep shuffling guys, and at some point you have to just go with the guys you've got. So what that means is they probably should have been shuffling guys more earlier in the year, but they didn't do it. So here they are, and now they don't want to shuffle guys. So I do think that there's probably someone out of that freshman linebacker group that could be an impact player. I certainly know there is the father of one of the freshman linebackers who is very assertive that is the case on Twitter, but I think that one of those guys, is it Kayvon Pope, is it Dallas Gann, is it Roger Mitchell? Like one of those guys probably could be a contributor at least. I mean, that's a position where you've seen guys occasionally step onto the field as freshmen and make an impact. Andy Katzenmoyer obviously famously did it. James Laurinaitis, he was a freshman when he came in for Bobby Carpenter in the 2005 Michigan game. So, yep. So, and that's a spot where you can. I mean, Laurinaitis wasn't great in that game. I think that's been sort of rewritten in history.
Yeah, he had one tackle, I believe.
He had some incredible game. He had one tackle, but he was there. He was part of the team in a big game, and they trusted a freshman to do it at that point. And so this is something that can happen. That's a place that a freshman can make an impact on the field. So that was my first answer. Wyatt Davis, I mean, he's obviously not a true freshman, but he played a little bit last week. He's someone that I think, it's probably worth exploring some changes on that offensive line, which I think that's probably going to come with Brady Taylor and Brandon Bowen coming back. If there's a change, it's going to be one of those guys. The other one, and this is going to be super on brand for this podcast, Urban Meyer talked on the conference call on Tuesday about the fact that Tate Martell, you were on the call and I was not. He used a phrase, it was something like frustratedly competitive or something like that. Like he was frustrated, but in a competitive way, right, that he hadn't gotten a chance to play. And I really, truly do not understand why he has not been on the field since the Tulane game. It has been a month and a half, and he has not been on the field since then, which is crazy to me. I think that's someone who, they have certainly talked up his playmaking ability and that he's on the list of their top playmakers and all that kind of stuff. And they want to, you want to get your top playmakers on the field, and they have at times not had a whole lot of playmaking ability play out on the field. So I would put him on that list as well. And he's one that we've seen do it already. He has not done it against spectacular competition, but that's a function of the fact that they have basically only played him against not spectacular competition. So to Roger Mitchell and Kayvon Pope and Dallas Gant, that's all kind of speculative. What would these guys look like? I don't know. Maybe they'd be good. Maybe they could contribute. Tate Martell, I think, almost certainly would contribute. So I guess I would probably put him at the top of this list.
I would also like to see more of Baron Browning. We see him in flashes, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not great. But I just like to see him more out there and to get a better idea personally, selfishly. You watch Tuff Borland, and sometimes it seems like you're not watching him. Like you can watch the defense and not see him. But then, he has 8 tackles, and the coaches rave about him, his leadership, his toughness, and they grade him a champion. And, who are we to judge other than judgers? That's who we are, basically, and telling people how wrong they are.
I mean, we have a podcast. Who I don't know what other qualifications you would need.
Right. Does Urban Meyer have a podcast? No.
But Jim Harbaugh does, and look what his record is this year.
Well, we can't go comparing Michigan and Ohio State right now. It's just 2 different planes, 2 different levels right now, 2 different levels. A head coach, one is attacking the day furiously, or what is it?
Enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
Right. And then Urban is attacking the day, 12 hours a day with 50-year-old men drawing plays on napkins is how he puts it. So I'm sure that's also enthusiastic, right?
The most enthusiastic napkin drawing you've ever seen in your whole life.
So that's how, you're right, because when Urban said either Tuesday or Monday, like, he's tired of the stopgapping. And that's, to me, like, once he gets the secondary healthy, which he thinks it'll be healthy this week, defensive line is as healthy as it's going to get this week. It seems like, this is our lineup. Now we're just going to go do it. And, he told me on Monday, like, I don't micromanage my guys and I let them put out who they want. But then I also, will talk to them about why isn't this guy starting and why is this guy starting. And, so we have to believe he gets all of the answers that he wants to hear, or that not that he wants to hear, but his assistants are honest with him, and then he agrees with what they're going to do. But I'm with you. Like, there's no reason that there hasn't been an opportunity for one series for Tate Martell in the last almost 2 months, it seems. Just one throwaway series. And you know what? If you want, just let him go 3 plays and then punt. Even if he gets you 3 first downs. If you don't want him out there that long, just let him punt after another first down. And then he can get off the field, and you can get Dwayne Haskins back in there. And you don't have to worry about Tate Martell for another few weeks. But when I saw him play earlier in the year, Tom, he looked like he could play football. Right?
American football?
American football.
Yes, I think so. I'm right there with you. Give him 3 plays. Give him a series. You give Tate Martell 3 plays, what do you have? 21 points. That's what you have.
Right, and who doesn't want 21 points?
I mean, it's blackjack. That's how you win. You get 21. Yeah, I cannot fathom how he has played 3 games this year. If he hadn't redshirted last year, he literally could redshirt this season as the backup quarterback on a team that has played a whole bunch of crappy opponents and should have been blowing them out. And so he should have been playing in blowouts. The fact that they weren't blowing them out means that he probably should have been playing because they weren't playing as well as they should have. So it's just, I don't understand how it's possible that he's not playing, because he said in the spring that they had packages for him. He said multiple times, I didn't come here to sit on the bench, and he's been sitting on the bench. And we have at times that I've seen him down on the sidelines at the end of the games when we're down on the sidelines, you can actually see up close. He has seemed like he's been in reasonably good spirits. He was, one of the earlier games when he was sitting and everyone was wondering, what is he thinking? He was smiling and high-fiving Dwayne Haskins on the sideline. So it's not that he's bitter and about to transfer necessarily, but it seems like that is a wasted opportunity that you've been struggling in the running game all year. And why not give that a try? What do you have to lose? That's the one thing that I just really don't get.
I saw him tweet Tuesday night. He was responding to a fan who said that, since he hadn't seen Tate Martell for a few weeks, he assumed he was suspended. And Tate Martell, quote tweeted that saying, "No, I am not suspended. Just an FYI, I'm still legally allowed to play. The coaches are just choosing not to exercise those rights for now. And like we said, it was either after the Nebraska game or leading up to that game. If you lose Dwayne Haskins right now, you've got a quarterback who hasn't played in forever. This is not this. These are where he needs to have reps just for the experience, for the possibility that he is going to be called upon.
I just looked at his Twitter account and his header photo, and I don't believe this was his header photo before, but the header photo is a picture of a neon sign that says everything is going to be all right. So
he's going to be the starting quarterback next year. I don't think he's that worried, honestly. I'm sure he would like to play now, but I'm also sure that he is looking forward to next year. And now if Dwayne Haskins decides to come back, now you might have some disgruntled mess in the quarterback room. But we can talk about that, in a couple of months, and we will. And we will.
And just because I'm sure you, dear listeners, are wondering this question, someone did ask him after we talked to him after, I believe it was the Rutgers game when he went 10 for 10. One of the reporters in the room asked him, "So, are you hoping Dwayne goes pro after this year?" And Tate just smiled and looked down, and it was like, next question. Yep. So that means yes, but he can't say it.
So Michigan State this weekend. Ohio State goes to East Lansing for a noon kickoff. Tom, what network is this game on?
I'm pretty sure it's a Fox game. I think it might be the Gus Johnson game, but if you talk for a while, I can look it up.
Can't you talk and look it up?
I could talk, but then knowing how my brain works, my brain will just be like, now I'm clicking on the URL bar and moving from Tate Martell's Twitter account to another website.
All right, this is
on the internet.
This is a good show. I can do this. Yeah.
Good thing you suckers have already rated us 5 stars before you got to this train wreck.
They've had Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt before, and I believe this is a Fox game, which means 4 hours and 15 minutes, maybe. The good news is there's going to be a lot of running, most likely. Michigan State will run the ball. Ohio State will attempt to run the ball. I'm not convinced that they will be able to run the ball. Michigan ran the ball pretty fairly against Michigan State. Let me bring that up here. And I think they've just been about the only team that has done it this year. Like, Michigan State's run defense stats are obscene, but I don't know that they are playing many great rushing teams. Michigan rushed for 205, or Penn State rushed for 205. Michigan ran for 183. What those two teams have that Ohio State does not have, however, is a quarterback who can also run. And I asked Dwayne Haskins on Tuesday, do you think that you have to show that you will run in order for your team to be able to run? Does Michigan State have to respect you as a runner for Ohio State to run against Michigan State? And of course, he said no. And I disagree with that. But he also said they have put more runs in for him this week. He's been running a lot in practice this week. He's running well. And if he has to run, and if the opportunity for him to pull the ball and run is there, so he'll take it. So expect some read option this week. But if you're just going to hand it off in that look, you're not. It's not going to do any good. So, you build off of what you did last week, and then you add to it maybe with some runs this week, just to keep the Michigan State defense honest. Because just handing the ball off, here are the yardages that they've given up this year: 25 in a game, 44. 29, 63, 8. And then you have the 205 to Penn State, the 183 to Michigan, then 62 and 26. And it's great that the Ohio State offensive line is rejuvenated and they've got a pep in their step and they're angry. But the Michigan State defensive line and the linebackers, they don't really care about that. What they care about is having to defend the entire field. And if the Ohio State offense isn't making them do that, then it makes life a whole lot easier for them. And I don't think Dwayne Haskins, Tom, can do a lot of running, because what's the point? But I think he has to show some in order just to keep the Michigan State defense honest, and maybe it ticks slow so that JK can get through, past the linebacker, or Mike Weber can get past the linebacker and into that next level. Dwayne Haskins has to be at least a threat.
yeah, you have to have something else for them to think about. Otherwise, it's too easy to it gets real predictable that you're just kind of blocking the guy in front of you and running the ball inside. And, I mean, they've run a lot of just kind of inside zone stuff, and I don't know if that's going to work without something else off of there to keep that from just crashing down real hard on it. I mean, you said Ohio State doesn't have a quarterback who can do that. Ohio State does have a quarterback who can do that, but he doesn't play. So it would be according to twitter.com, no, he is not. One thing that I think I would be interested to see how the pistol stuff works this weekend. That Tony Alford talked on Tuesday night about the advantage of that pistol, where in the current run game, they're taking kind of a sideways step to take the handoff, and then they have to stick their foot in the ground and then go upfield. He said if you run it out of the pistol, you are running downhill.
It's I formation.
And you are hitting the line. Yeah, it's I form. It's basically I formation, and you got some big dudes up in front of you. You throw Wyatt Davis in an eligible number jersey, and you've got another big blocker in front of you. I would like to see what that looks like, and you're going to have to show some other stuff out of that. You're going to have to throw out of that. You're going to have to, show some jet motion out of that. Whatever it is, you're going to have to do some other stuff to kind of keep them honest. But if they can start running downhill like that, you get J.K. Dobbins with a head of steam, that maybe makes it easier for him to break that one tackle at the line of scrimmage and get into that second level and maybe make something really big happen. Because that could be, when he said that tonight, it was like, yeah, that could explain part of why they don't break a ton of tackles at the line of scrimmage, that they're not really going with a full head of steam when they hit that line of scrimmage in the way that they could if they're, really, truly running downhill. So that's at least worth exploring on Saturday. I don't know if it's really going to work, but that was the first thing that I saw all year that I thought, yeah, that at least is at least worth looking into against some of the better run defenses they're going to face this month.
I'll be interested to see what the wrinkle this week is. We saw a few different things last week, including Paris Campbell motioning into the backfield and split backs, and the Wyatt Davis thing, and more running out of the pistol. Will there be more additions this week? Will we see the two backs? Will we see Tate Martell? I was almost thinking like we should make wagers with our meal tickets that we got from the Michigan State press box, and just to let people know, the press box food in Michigan State, you get 2 meal tickets, and you can get a hot dog, you can get a bratwurst, or I think you can get a pretzel, and you only get 2. So these are very valuable things. And I was thinking maybe we should wager one of our meal tickets on I'll say Tate Martell will play. He'll be like a wrinkle, except that's a terrible bet, and I would have to put up 1 meal ticket for all of your meal tickets. Those are the kind of odds you would have to give me. But even then, I'm not going to risk it, because we're going to be there all freaking day, and I'm going to need at least a second bratwurst. So these are too valuable to wager. But something new is going to be employed, because you've already shown Michigan State everything. So now you have to have something that they haven't seen, right?
Right. That's kind of the ongoing cat and mouse game every season, is you show something and then you have to have something off of that, and then the defense has to react to that, and then you have something to answer that answer, and then the defense has to answer that, and then it just goes on and on and on. And when this is what we talk about when we're talking about showing something to make a defense prepare for something that you don't necessarily plan on doing. You have to, every time you show something, the defense has to figure out, okay, how are we going to stop that? And then they have to think, they know that we know that they know that we know that they're going to do this, and then that when they do this, we're going to do that, and then that means that they're going to probably answer in that way. And you're just giving them stuff to think about and wasting time, basically. But that's how it works with just about everything. That if you show something, the other team has to have an answer for it, and then you have to anticipate what their answer is going to be and have something that answers their answer, and then they have to have an answer to your answer for their answer, and on and on and on. So that's why college football coaches spend 900 hours a week sitting in rooms drawing up stuff on whiteboards, because they have to do sort of college football inception.
Contingencies for contingencies.
Exactly. Now, to your more important point, I really like the idea of bartering food tickets this weekend in the press box. Like, this is the most valuable commodity we have in this small enclosed space. This is like cigarettes in prison. Like, we can just barter. We could barter. If we give someone one drink ticket, do you think we can get them to transcribe the post-game interviews for us? Like, how valuable are these in this closed society of the press?
Well, what we're gonna do when we get there is, once the Lantern kids get there, we're just gonna beat them up, and we're gonna just take their food tickets and just intimidate them, be be total bullies. They're Lantern kids. It's fine. They don't need to eat. They're college kids. They're used to not eating anyway. And then now we've got some money to play with. Now we can take that and maybe make some bets some other places, and basically just create an empire.
Really, really splash the pot like at poker, except we're betting with food tickets. This is great. I do like the idea of you bullying the Lantern kids and just stealing their tickets and screaming, "This is the best 4 years of your life. It's all downhill from here."
I wish they knew that. If we could just impart that, no other lesson for the Lantern kids other than, these are the best years of your life, and it's all downhill once you leave Ohio State. Once you leave college, forget it. It's terrible. Just stay in school for as long as you can. Keep going to those frat parties until you're 36 years old. People respect you for that. That's what cool people do. Be one of those cool people. Don't ever leave. And then eventually you'll be like a professor. So I think that's how that works. Is that how that works?
And the cycle starts all over again. Yes.
We're talking about this Michigan State game, and really all I'm talking about, all you're talking about, all we're talking about is the Ohio State running game. Because for me, it seems like that's all it comes down to. The Michigan State offense can be dangerous. They're kind of banged up. LJ Scott, I think, is fine. Quarterback Brian Lewerke is fine. Will be back. They're without their top receiver Felton Davis, but they've got other guys. But they're like a poor man's Penn State offensively, I'd say, maybe, where Lewerke can do some things that he's not as dynamic as Trace McSorley, but he can run and he can throw. But he has looked terrible at times. I don't know if Ohio State's defense is capable of making him look terrible. I think if Ohio State can run the ball, then they'll win. For me, that's the big question. I also think they can win if they can't run the ball very well. I don't know. How do you feel about that? If they're held under 100 yards? Well, I mean, we've seen teams have beaten Michigan without running the ball, so obviously Ohio State could do that. Is your biggest concern the Ohio State running game in this game?
I think so. I think you have to be able to run the ball at least somewhat. You don't have to run for 250 yards, but you've got to be able to run the ball. I think that's true about Michigan State, and I think it's true in 3 weeks against Michigan. They don't have to run like they did against Nebraska for whatever it was, 8 yards a carry or whatever it ended up being, but they've got to be able to at least consistently pick up 4 or 5 yards. You cannot have 1 yard, where they just completely abandon the run and become one-dimensional passing the ball. Because, again, the weather on Saturday looks like not great. All of a sudden, it's not 70 degrees and sunny, and 450 yards through the air is not quite as easy as it was earlier in the year. Michigan State, on the other side of the ball, they have such a weird offense. I looked up some of the advanced stats on their offense, and they are much better on passing downs than they are on standard downs. They're 82nd in the nation on standard downs, which is basically 1st and 10, and then if you get 4 yards on first down and you get 2nd and 6, then you get another 4 yards on third down, it's 3rd and 2. Passing downs are, okay, we got stuffed on first down, so now it's 2nd and 11, so now we have to throw the ball because we can't run it. So they are better on standard downs than they are on passing downs. And it's because they're super predictable in a lot of games. They always save stuff for the Ohio State game, for the Michigan game. But in the other games, they're super predictable. And they are the most run, pass team you've ever seen. So when they have to make a play, they're not great, but they're not terrible at it. But if you can do what other teams have done to them, which is stuff the run on first down, stuff the run on second down, put them in that third down play. I mean, they're better on passing downs, get them on second and long, get them on third and long. They're better, but they're not great. So I think that's you have to assume they're going to be a run first team on Saturday. Lewerke's coming off a shoulder injury, and it sounds like he's going to play, but he is not 100%, I don't think. LJ Scott's coming off a sprained ankle. He sprained it like months ago. He sprained it against Arizona State, I think. And he has not played. He's missed a bunch of times. He played against Purdue, but I don't think finished the game. So he's not healthy. You mentioned Felton Davis. They've got a bunch of offensive linemen banged up. I think that Ohio State could play a pretty good game defensively, could hold Michigan State under 20, but Michigan State saved some stuff. Michigan State is not the same team against Ohio State that they are against some of their lesser opponents.
Well, here's the last 5 games for Michigan State. These are all Big Ten games. Here's what they've scored: 19, 21, 7, 23, and then 24 against Maryland last week. So the offense has struggled, which is definitely good news for the Buckeyes. Now, Michigan State has lost the game where they gave up 44 yards rushing. They lost at Arizona State. They lost the game where they gave up 8 yards rushing to Northwestern, inexplicably lost by 10 points that time. So there are ways for Michigan State to, I mean, obviously it's Sparty. They find ways to lose games, except for against Ohio State generally. So that's why I wonder if Ohio State will be able to get up enough to avoid the Sparty miracle that they might have for the Buckeyes. And, going all the way back to 1998 and even, decades before that, I'm sure, stuff happened then before, the 98 thing just took everything else over. But I don't know that the Ohio State offense, and, we said the same thing last year. I mean, you picked Michigan State to beat Ohio State last year. If you'll recall.
I don't remember how that game went. I'm sure it was close.
But I just wonder if Ohio State's offense will be able to get up by enough points to avoid any sort of catastrophe. Tom, breaking news right here. You'll hear it first here. Ohio State is 10th in the college football playoff poll. Breaking news. You heard it first here when you're listening to this on Wednesday.
Did Florida fall behind them and West Virginia jumped them?
I don't know. All the SEC teams look alike to me.
Okay, that's fine. It doesn't matter.
It does not matter.
You do not need to pay attention to that until if and when they beat Michigan, and then you can start thinking about that.
I think Kentucky was 11th ish. Hey, let's get to listener questions. How does that sound?
That sounds wonderful, because we love our listeners, because all of them gave us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
You're going to say Yelp.
Even the one we deserve a Michelin star for this podcast. That's what I think.
Tasty.
First question from @ShelbyGoldman2. What's the rationale for running the zone read with a QB who is allergic to running?
I don't know that he's allergic to it. I just think it makes him sneeze and his eyes well up.
I mean, I'm not an allergy doctor, but I'm pretty sure that's what an allergy is.
Oh, my bad then. A lot of that is not zone read. It's just, he's just handing the ball off. But the rationale is that's the offense. I mean, that they're in the shotgun. That's how they hand the ball off. I do, like you said, I'm always a fan of the pistol. The more you can do the pistol, it's always helped the running game, regardless of the quarterback. And that goes all the way back to Nevada, even like Colin Kaepernick, and before then, with running the pistol and with the read option in that. And that, if you go back and watch some of the old quote unquote old pistol offenses from the early 2000s and mid 2000s and late 2000s, there's some good offenses there, and I've always been a fan of that. But he's, like we said earlier, he's going to have to run the ball, or at least show that he is willing to run the ball. But in terms of the rationale for running the zone read. That's just part of the offense. And like I said, not all of those are reads. Most of them are not reads. More of them will have to be reads this week.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that TCU game where basically the only run you've seen, you can remember him having that was not didn't end with you kind of groaning, was the play where he kept it on the zone read against TCU at some point in the second half, and TCU was crashing so hard every single time, and it was like if he keeps it once, he's going to just walk into the end zone, and he kept it once and walked into the end zone. And after the game, we asked, so basically, why did you wait so long to keep it? And they said that was actually the first time they had called it actually as a read play. It had just been straight handoffs before then. So the action looks the same, just in terms of what he's doing with the running back, but that does not necessarily mean there's always a read on the play. So, next question from Stuart E4 US Vet. Hypothetical question: if Urban waves his magic wand and fixes the defensive woes, our offense starts to click in the run and pass. How far do we get? What is our win-loss record moving forward? Is Joel Klatt right when he says there is biases in the ranking system? And I just first of all would like to say that my favorite part of this question was Stuart accidentally typed woes like the Joey Lawrence whoa. So
fitting.
I assume that's an autocorrect thing, and if it is, it's the best autocorrect thing ever, because it has definitely been a whoa kind of defense, but not necessarily in a good way. So I think if you are just saying if the Ohio State offense and defense play up to the caliber of their recruiting rankings and the level that the coaching staff is paid at and the caliber of the program in general, then what are they, number 2 in the nation behind Alabama right now? That's probably what they look like. They are beating everyone except Alabama and thumping a lot of the teams they're playing right now. I mean, they beat Michigan State by 17 points or 24 points. They beat Maryland by 40. They beat Michigan by at least a touchdown. And then whoever comes out of the West, it's if it's Wisconsin or Northwestern, just gets completely destroyed in the Big Ten championship game. And then if it magically gets fixed right now, they're still probably a 3 or 4 seed in the college football playoff, which means you may be playing Alabama in that Cotton Bowl in that college football playoff semifinal, and it's at least a competitive game if everything magically gets fixed. But I mean, I no one mentioned a magic wand during interviews this week, so I don't know if that's actually going to happen. But it would certainly solve a lot of problems if they did find one.
Man, I'll tell you what, if he has a magic wand and he has not been using it, fire that guy. Fire him right now. If Gene Smith comes out and makes a statement like, we were just made aware that Urban Meyer has had a magic wand and has not used it, and imagine how betrayed Alex Grinch would feel. That poor guy. He probably gets 2 hours of sleep a night, and when he's sleeping, he's thinking about safeties. And for Urban Meyer to be so selfish to what's the magic wand doing? Hanging on the wall in your Dublin mansion so that you can have another piece of fancy furniture? Give me a break. Where do you get off? Next.
And as for the Joel Klatt right when he says there's a bias in the ranking system? I don't know which ranking system, if it's the playoff system. I think the answer is ignore the playoff system ranking right now because they're stupid and irrelevant until the end of the season.
Yeah, it's about playoff rankings, and specifically he had like a 9-minute rant, and much of it it's based around like the SEC getting the benefit of the doubt, but most of it was about Frank Beamer's influence on the ACC teams being in there and how they're so much lower in the nerd stuff that you like than the Big Ten teams who are not in the college football polls. So he had this overarching point about, I guess, the maybe some SEC bias, but he talked mainly about the ACC. But you're already seeing, like, ESPN tonight, Tuesday night, was saying, like, what happens if Georgia beats Alabama? Do they both get in? You're starting to see that, and you'll be seeing it more and more as, like, they just keep asking, how do they keep Alabama in if they lose? And they're already, like, just going to make it perfectly okay for it to happen if Alabama loses in the SEC championship game, where it's, no losses ever matter for Alabama because we all know, Tom, they're the best.
Yeah, they have an auto bid.
Right.
That's it. Now, I do think this is worth pointing out. In addition to, don't worry about it, it's okay. Nothing you yell and scream about right now is going to change anything. So that's the first thing. The second thing is ESPN has, in this discussion is about how ESPN may or may not have a pro SEC bias because ESPN has the SEC and all of that. Joel Klatt works for Fox. Fox broadcasts Big Ten games. I do not believe Fox has a deal with the SEC, and I don't think they have a deal with the ACC either. So if you're going to point out the network-centric bias based on conference TV deals on one side, it's worth pointing out that it may exist in the inverse as well.
You make me sick, Tom.
Quick, send out a tweet that I'm a traitor, but spell it Trader. Next one from E. Bronstee. How good will our defense make the MSU anemic offense look?
Tom?
Since you mentioned nerd stats, Michigan State right now is 95th overall in S&P Plus on offense, which is not great. 68th in success rate, which is basically just kind of consistently moving the ball, getting 4 yards, getting 5 yards, getting 6 yards, not getting behind the chains. So 68th, so basically dead center of the country right now there. 58th in isolated points per play, which is kind of explosive plays. So not great, but you translate that to the 2018 Ohio State defense, and that probably puts them about 25th in the country. 87th in rushing, 68th in passing, and I already mentioned 82nd on standard downs and 58th on passing downs. So they've certainly been hamstrung by, we already discussed the kind of conservative play calling, and the injuries have played a part too. They have lost a ton of offensive linemen. They lost Brian Lewerke, their quarterback, for a while. They've lost L.J. Scott, who's a starting running back for a good chunk of the season. They lost Felton Davis, who's probably their best wide receiver. I mean, you lose in the same way that Ohio State's defense has kind of been hurt by all of the injuries. Michigan State's offense has been hurt by all of those injuries. And Ohio State's gotten most of those guys back, obviously not Nick Bosa, but pretty much everyone has come back from those injuries now for Ohio State. It sounds like a lot of those guys are going to be back for Michigan State, not Felton Davis, and I think some of the offensive linemen may still be out this weekend, but Lewerke probably plays, L.J. Scott probably plays, so they may not be quite as bad as those stats would indicate, but they're not great, and I think if Ohio State can get to 28 or 31 points this week, I'd feel pretty confident that they're going to be able to win.
I have this thing where it feels like Michigan State to me tops out at about 20 points, which is, it feels kind of dumb to say based on, the number of points that the Ohio State defense has given up. But when you consider how conservative Mark D'Antonio is, how often they are not scoring 20 points in the game in the last handful of games, I think, like you said, if Ohio State gets 28, that feels like a pretty safe, secure spot for them to be in. Anything beyond like 24 just seems like you shouldn't be giving up more than 24 points to this team.
No, I think if Michigan State hits 30 on Saturday, first of all, I think if Michigan State hits 30 on Saturday, then Ohio State probably loses. But even if they don't lose, that's a huge, huge, huge red flag that, nope, whatever you think has been fixed has not been fixed. It is still a problem, and it's going to be a real problem in 2 weeks when Michigan comes to town.
Yeah, that's your opinion. that I also share.
Maybe Michigan will get lost. I don't know. Who's to say? College football.
Well, it's tough. There's no single straight road that goes from Ann Arbor to Columbus, as far as I know.
Ohio State's, instead of the week when Ohio State's coaches did not recruit because they were going to stay inside and work on fixing the offense and defense, Ohio State's coaches will not recruit the week before the Michigan game because they will be on 23 putting all sorts of misleading signage up. Columbus, turn right, it's just past California. I don't know. It could work. I'm just saying, think about it.
Probably they're going to send the Michigan bus to Olentangy Caverns, and the bus will be stuck in the caves. And, where's Michigan? They forfeit,
All right, next one from at OSU Defender. Is Brendon White's performance an example of coaches failing to properly evaluate talent, or is it a coaches being too loyal to underperforming starters? I don't buy that White has never shown anything in practice.
Yes. Alex Grinch has only been here for a year, but he's seen enough, and we've already explained why the coaches haven't necessarily put him out there. But it's also, he's also said that Brendon White just really started playing better in the last week or two in practice. So there is the possibility that Brendon White was not this good, 4 weeks ago, and has only gotten this good or played well enough to play recently. So it's not one of these things where I don't think he's been the best option from day one. It's something where he's had to prove himself in practice, and it just makes you wonder, like, what was Jocelyn Wint doing in practice? Was it just the special team stuff, which he's good at, and that's what gets him on defense? Isaiah Pryor, I think they really, really wanted him to be the guy, and the fact that he wasn't this year has been a disappointment overall. And, just going back between Pryor and Wint instead of White, maybe they were too focused on those two guys, trying to decide, which one of those guys it would be, and then White's not getting enough reps. And then maybe when they figure out that it's not going to be Jocelyn Wint, and then Brendon White also figures that out, and he's like, well, now I have my opportunity to at least compete one-on-one for a job. Maybe that's when it kicked in for him. But, it's not that he has never shown anything in practice. I think it's just that the consistency hasn't come until recently.
And it's worth noting that Brendon White did not look like this in the spring. Brendon White did not have a particularly great spring in the limited. I mean, we did not get to see a ton of spring ball, but he did not look like this in the spring, and it wasn't like the coaches were intentionally holding him down. If he was number 3 on the depth chart coming out of spring, then you're not going to get that many snaps in practice. You're not going to get that many reps. And it's hard to show, to prove yourself if your last impression of someone is a guy who's not that good at football, and you don't get a whole lot of chances to prove yourself in practice. It can take a while for, your limited opportunities to sort of overshadow the preconceived notion of what you are. But it certainly looks like he has taken a leap from spring to now in a way that Pryor and Wint haven't. So that's probably part of it. Next one from at OSU Hoops Insider. An OSU basketball overview would be nice. Expectations, predictions, key players, most improved players.
Tom, we kind of already did that.
We did. I think the short, I guess if you want to have a real short answer, key player, I think Caleb Wesson might be. Caleb Wesson and C.J. Jackson and Luther Muhammad maybe are kind of the three guys that if those three guys have a good season, the team's probably going to have a pretty good season.
Most improved player for me, I would say, like Kyle Young, based on what they like him to do. Yeah. He can rebound, he can defend. He has improved his 3-point shot, which he showed a little bit last year. A guy that I was disappointed in the UNC Pembroke game was Musa Jallow, who turned the ball over quite a bit. His shot still looks very forced, and it's not smooth. So, and that's a guy who should be a college freshman finally this year, and who's actually a sophomore who skipped his senior year in high school. And I think maybe that has stunted his growth a little bit. And it's not going to help when he is not getting the minutes because Luther Muhammad and Dwayne Washington and Andre Wesson are. But yeah, most improved. I'm looking forward to seeing what Kyle Young does this year because every team needs those guys, the glue guy, the effort guy, diving for football, diving for the basketball, and can also be a stretch 4. And he's one of those guys that I think drives Buckeye fans crazy when he's on the other team, and he's one of those guys that should start driving other programs crazy, maybe in January.
All right, next one from at Aaron J. Wenzel. There's been a lot of focus on safety and linebacker, but not as much on the defensive line. Seems like they haven't rotated as much with Bosa out. Am I off base with that? Are the younger guys just not ready for extended playing time yet? I looked at this a little bit, and there has not been as much rotation as there was early in the year, which, I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense because you lose Nick Bosa. You're not going to you have taken one of these great players off the field. Your depth is no longer as deep, and So yes, of course you're not rotating as much as you were earlier. But if you go through the snap counts, Chase Young, Jonathan Cooper are up. Jayshon Cornell's kind of holding steady. And Haskell Garrett has picked up some snaps at end. Tyreek Smith is still mostly playing in that Rushman package, and Tyler Friday is hurt right now. He was not dressed for the last game, and he has not played a ton in recent weeks. He may have been kind of banged up before that. I'm not totally sure on that. But I think they have the guys who they trust. Tyreek Smith, they trust to a certain degree, but it may be they don't completely trust him in the run game kind of thing right now. They don't trust him to hold up against the run, so they can't play him in anything other than that Rushman package for the most part. So if your rotation has not gotten any deeper, if you haven't added anyone at the bottom of that rotation, then the guys at the top are just going to end up playing more. And I think that's pretty much what's happened.
Yeah, and it's good to see, Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett getting out there more, but just the health, and there's fewer guys to rotate, basically. And I did think we would see more Tyreek Smith at defensive end, but, just hasn't happened yet.
All right, next one from @GoBucks81. Podcast question. My biggest takeaway from this weekend was a total lack of emotion. I was expecting a pissed-off team like after the Iowa embarrassment last year. Is one of the biggest issues a lack of leadership?
I don't know how I feel about this, because on one hand, you have a captain quit the team. I'm out of here. I'm going to go work on myself and bettering myself. On the other, and then you also there was a question early in the season when you've got three captains at receiver, and they're all, jokingly like, it's the diva position. How can you guys be great leaders? And yet, when Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell were freshmen, Mickey Marotti saw right away that these guys were going to change that room and change the dynamics of the Ohio State football program with their leadership and work ethic. I don't know. For me, sometimes leadership just seems like a cop out, and Urban Meyer likes the leadership that he has here. It's just, for me, it's more lack of execution, lack of being put in proper positions. I mean, listen to how much we have talked about Greg Schiano not putting the guys in the defense in proper spots, and Bill Davis not coaching them up well enough, and the offensively, like asking Dwayne Haskins to do stuff that he's not great at. How can your offense struggle when you've got the best passing quarterback in Ohio State history? And if you can't work with that, then that's not his fault. That's your fault. I just, leadership, I mean, it is what it is. I don't know that it's that big of a deal. Even though they lose, it's hard to replace. And I'll keep going back to Pat Elflein mostly, and Billy Price was a nice facsimile of that. But, maybe up front, they're missing that leadership. Elsewhere, I don't really have strong feelings one way or the other that it's all that important.
All right, next one from Indiana Buckeye. OSU teams have played down to the level of competition before. Does it help that 3 significant tests lie ahead? I mean, I don't anticipate focus being a real issue this weekend against Michigan State, and I don't anticipate focus being an issue against Michigan for obvious reasons. I think you'll probably see them come out and give their best shot. I mean, I don't think you're going to see them get completely embarrassed and blown off the field by Michigan State this weekend, and I don't think you're necessarily going to see that against Michigan either. I don't think focus is going to be an issue. The Maryland game, that's a weird sandwich spot. You're coming off of a road game, and it's another road game, and it's between two games against teams that you traditionally care about and circle on the schedule, and it's Maryland in the middle. But Maryland's pretty crappy this year, so it might not matter, but I could see them kind of coming out flat in that game.
Don't you almost expect them to come out flat in Maryland, especially if they have a big win against Michigan State? And I think you go to Maryland to be flat, basically. I think that's the state motto. Come to Maryland, be flat, and then go home.
I thought you went to Maryland to get the crab pretzel thing that they have at the stadium. Is that not? Have I been misinformed?
It just depends if you've got the $26 to pay for it or not. That's a lot to pay for a pretzel. I don't care what's on it.
Maybe we could barter some of our Michigan State tickets in for some kind of like futures thing.
That's true.
For the Maryland
In
thing.
2 years, you're really going to want these.
Think about how they'll appreciate in value before the Ohio State comes back here in 2020. All right, since it's a smooth transition, I'm going to skip ahead to the question I have from Mike. What is your favorite Columbus pizza place?
I don't spend a lot of money on pizza, but I do. There is a Giordano's now up here at Polaris, but that's more of a Chicago thing. Rotolo's was always good for, spend a lot of money on a pizza and have it for a while. So I know Tommy's is another popular one, but I don't get to campus very often. Other than like 3 times a week for work. But I don't get there for leisure ever. So I don't really have a favorite Columbus pizza thing. And Tom, I thought like I wasn't allowed to like answer food questions on the show anymore anyway.
See, you have bad food opinions because you mentioned Chicago style pizza and not New York style pizza. So your undefeated streak of being wrong about food in every possible circumstance continues. Good job.
What about you?
Let's see, I guess we'll start on campus. I have strong pizza opinions, and the first pizza opinion is if you have a choice to eat Chicago style pizza or New York style pizza and you choose Chicago style pizza, you should just like, I don't know, get one of those feeding tubes because you're bad at the actual eating thing. That's just not a good choice. So I don't want casserole, I want pizza. So on the OSU campus, I was always partial to Adriatico's.
Yes.
I was a South Campus guy. Adriatico's is a classic. If you're up on North Campus, this is not New York style, but they do a very unique pizza at Hound Dogs. You can get the spicy sauce there. It is super greasy. It is the only place that I've ever seen that comes close to the old Dr. Nick. If you rub the food on the paper and the paper turns clear, it's your window to weight gain. Like the grease that comes off of the Hound Dogs pizza is so thick and so greasy that it just soaks through the box. So that is a North Campus recommendation. You can't do that very often. Even in college, you can't do that very often, but you get the spicy sauce there, Smokin' Joe's style. Get it that way. They have like a garlic butter they put on the sauce or on the crust, and it is delightful. That is a strong recommendation for you North Campus people.
Now, I can give a recommendation for campus people back from my days on campus. A little place called a Papa John's. And if you look in your lantern, there'll be a coupon there for a large for $5.95. There you go. If things have not changed in the last 20 years.
And I'm quite certain that they have not. And if you do happen to find yourself out in lovely Granville, Ohio, I would strongly recommend Joe and Mimi's Pizza, which is very good, like a shockingly good New York style pizza for a small town in the middle of nowhere in Ohio.
Let me interrupt you one more time. So my wife and I were talking about, this is a few months ago, like let's get some pizza we haven't had before. And I don't remember what it was, whether it was like Massey's or Minuteman or something. So I called up and I ordered this and this and this. I think I ordered like 2 pizzas and maybe something else. And they're like, okay, that'll be like $52. I'm like, okay. And I hung up and I'm like, I have to call back and cancel that order. I am not paying $52 for like 2 pizzas and cheesy bread. And so then I called and I canceled, and I can't do it, man.
Where are you getting pizza from that it's 2 pizzas and cheesy bread is $52?
They didn't have any coupons.
That is not like, are they made of gold?
Yes, it was a
20
large pepperoni and Goldschlager pizza, deep dish. No, maybe it was like 45 or something, but it was over $40. And I still, I can't. And, like a large at Giordano's is going to be like $25, and that's fine. We'll get one. But if I'm just getting like a regular, like Pizza Hut, not Pizza Hut, but like a regular just pan pizza, just like any other pizza, and it's $20 for a large, you're crazy. I can't. I won't.
That's only worth it if it's the kind of magical pizza we were talking about earlier that would magically fix the Ohio State defense. If you can get a pizza like that, that's worth $52 for 2 larges.
And cheesy bread.
Otherwise, probably not. And add the cheesy bread really tips it over the edge. If you are a volume eater on campus, I don't know if Gumby's Pizza is still there, but if you are if you are a volume eater and not particularly put off by the threat of, I don't know if I can legally say botulism on the podcast, but some sort of foodborne intestinal distress, Gumby's Pizza was always a great choice if you had $3 that you found in a couch cushion and wanted to get like a 18-inch pizza for $3.
The great thing that,
they always made that happen.
And it's like, it wasn't the best pizza, but it was a lot of it. And then you could also get poke sticks.
It's like Carmelo Anthony's not a good shooter, but he's a volume shooter.
Exactly.
It is the Carmelo Anthony of pizza.
Yes.
All right. Next one from SoCal. Why were they running the high-risk, aggressive defense in the first place? My guess is they felt a bend but don't break strategy wouldn't hold up in the playoffs, even if it would have been a more sound strategy for the regular season. So they had to break it in on lesser competition, but it never took.
I still think it goes back to like the 2013 game against Clemson, where they played that bend but don't break, and it just drove Urban Meyer crazy. And he said right then and there, like, I am never going to do this again. A lot like the 2016 game against Clemson, where he's like, this will never happen here again. I think he felt the same way about the bend but don't break and the off man coverage and just giving up catches and not making every pass, not challenging every pass like he says now. Just that almost broke him, and he just vowed at that point to never do it again. And now this year they've got the defense that does not do well with situations like that, so they have played more zone, and the corners are bailing out a little bit more. They're not changing much of what they do, but they're changing some things and just keeping things so they're not, the offense doesn't know every time that it's going to be press man. They do bail out quite a bit. They do, different things, and they're playing some zone finally. And but I think if you can be a press man team, that's great because it makes everything more difficult. Eventually, however, if that's not working for you, Tom, you got to stop.
Right, and you've got to remember, when they planned this all out in the summertime, they had Nick Bosa on the team, and Nick Bosa was going to give the quarterback a half a second less on average, give or take, per play, which means you can jam them, and they have a lot less time to get past you than they would without Nick Bosa there. And they haven't had Nick Bosa for a while, and it's been a problem. That's not the only problem, but that's certainly been part of the problem. The other thing I wondered about is it could have something to do with the offense, because I think they probably came into the year figuring the offense is probably going to score a pretty good number of points. So you have a little bit more leeway to risk giving up a big play, and one big play does not necessarily kill you the way it would if you have an offense that's going to score 20 points instead of 35 or 40 points. And you can risk giving up that big play because you're going to get those points back, and also you don't want to let the other team hold the ball for a 7-minute drive. You want to try and get them off the field, get your offense back on there. If Dwayne Haskins and the offense is sitting on the bench, they're not scoring. So that's a strategy that you've seen some air raid teams take in the past, and this is not an air raid team this year, but it's closer than Ohio State has had in most of their years in the past. So that could have played into that decision as well.
I think the thought that if we give up some big plays in the passing game, that's okay. That's going to happen, but it's okay because the rest of our defense will tackle well. And since that hasn't happened, that just makes things even worse. Whereas if the linebackers were tackling, if the defensive line was stopping the play before it could, get out there, or if the safety opposite Jordan Fuller wasn't just crashing in out of control and watching somebody go flying by him, that would have made things better as well. But, that's not what has happened. So it has made the press coverage, the press man made it even more risky, even riskier to do that. And they've paid for it. And now they're trying to fix it in terms of like not making it as flammable or as inflammable, Tom.
Those words, even though they sound like they're the opposites, they mean the same thing, which is stupid, but you were right twice, which let's just embrace this moment. You were right twice in like a 3-second span. So that was pretty good.
I think we should just end the show right there.
Well, I do have one more note. Earlier we were speculating on who the TV crew was, and I was Googling furiously and not coming up with anything, and then remembered that the wonderful OSU SID staff has presented us every Monday with a huge packet of information about the game. And literally on the front page of that packet, there's information on who's calling the game. And good news, it's a Gus Johnson game. So it's Gus and Joel Klatt and Jenny Taft doing the game on Fox at noon on Saturday. So there you go.
Is that good news, though? If it's a Gus Johnson game, I mean, that means shenanigans and hijinks.
But yeah, I mean, I guess it's I'm fine with hijinks. I don't want a boring game. I want an interesting game. So, and really for us, it doesn't really matter because we can't hear the call in the press box anyway. And the kids love Gus Johnson. So I think everyone.
I just had a thought. We do our post game show like after the interviews, then we do our post game podcast. However, Tom, we will need to go and secure pizza. So just remember that we'll have to like go grab a pizza, because if we go do our show after that, if we go do our show after the game and then we try to get up there for post game pizza, there may not be any. So let this serve as my reminder to you, as you are also hearing me this time right now, and then as you will also hear me while you are editing it, and then I will probably also remind you 4 times in the car on the way up to East Lansing. But we need to secure our pizza before we do the show.
And if you are someone who will be in that post-game interview with us, please remind us to go get pizza.
As if we would forget.
As if we would forget. As if Gerd has not already tattooed this on his arm.
PP, post-game pizza, baby. All right, so that is the Buckeye Weekly podcast, and we appreciate you listening. If this showed up on your phone or in your library, you're like, what is this? And then you were listening, you're like, oh, yeah, it's us. So thank you for listening. Make sure to tell your friends, your family. We're going to see a lot of your family this month. As they're trying to tell you what they've been up to, like, just change the subject, talk about us, say, hey, do you like podcasts? Or do you have the internet? And if they're like, yes, then boy, have we got something for you. And just let them know that there's a podcast out there for them. We are for the every person, and we appreciate everybody listening. And like we said earlier, rate us, review us. 5-star ratings are the best, because there are no 6-star ratings yet. Do a screenshot of that, and so help me if you do a screenshot and then back out of that rating, I will find you. I will know who you are. But if you do screenshot it, let me know. Send it to me. And like I said, I'll pull some together and pick out some and get you guys a copy of the Trilogy, and to show our appreciation for your constant listening. And more people are listening all of the time. And that was really the reason to change the title so that more people could find us, because why should they be missing out on the greatness that you get to experience, right, Tom?
I am living the dream right now. If you dear listeners only get to hear it once, unless you listen 3 times. You know what? Try listening 3 times on different devices. See if it gets better.
Yeah. See, I guess. Sure. Good luck with that. And thank you for listening for the first time. Thank you for listening the second time. And if you are a 4-time listener of this episode, well, I hope your meds are good. So have a good day. We will talk to you guys after the game Saturday, what should be an outstanding game, because Gus Johnson is going to make it crazy. So we'll see you then. Bye.
We could steal a car and leave.